Behold, my Patreon supporter Free William says, I'm so annoyed by finishers when I don't want to do them. It seems like it would be so easy to have them bound to a different key. Well, there are a variety of things about this. I mean, I do agree with the sentiment that when you're doing a combo, and let's say you have blast damage or something, an enemy gets knocked down, and then your combo is interrupted by you doing a ground finisher, which doesn't ignore armor, so it's not even that much damage, and you're just like, ugh. Now, when you do like a standing finisher, a counterattack finisher, it's called, that does go through armor, and it has like the bagillion% bonus damage, so that's usually not too bad against one enemy, but the problem is that it's not good against multiple targets, and if you're surviving with, say, a healing return build, or you're killing enemies with, let's say, status duration, which I know Free William likes a lot, you don't exactly want to kill one enemy for a lot of damage. It's just not efficient, right? And if you're surviving with healing return, you're probably going to die from doing that. So they're bad. They can be actively bad, right? Killing enemies one at a time in a horde shooter is just not very good. The first problem I can think of, is that if you're on a controller, right, you're not on keyboard, there aren't enough keys or buttons. There already aren't enough buttons. A lot of people have talked about how since channeling and like switching weapons and all these things are on different buttons, even if they were to add something like, you can switch into powerful devil trigger mode, which is something that they were floating as an idea for Melee 3.0 in the future. Like, what button would it go on? Like, there aren't enough buttons for that stuff. Now, full disclosure, I don't play on a controller. I've actually never played on a controller, nor do I have any desire to, partially for that exact reason, that I like having buttons for stuff. One of my favorite things to do is, have different things in my gear wheel bound to buttons. So, like, I think it's a little awkward, for example, that the Arcwing launcher and the K-Drive summoner thing are bound to buttons. That's how awkward I feel it is. It makes me sneeze because I'm being exposed to the light. And I like having those key bound. I think I have them bound to, I want to say V and X, or I think my heavy weapon is bound to B. Yeah, I have my heavy weapon bound to something. So, like, I don't know, I wouldn't want those to be on the gear wheel. Like, it doesn't feel, it's like weapon swapping. Like, I want it to feel like weapon swapping. Heavy weapons on weapon swap, that would be pretty spicy. Anyway, so I definitely understand the frustration in concept that, like, having limited numbers of keys, that doesn't sound fun to me, So yeah, like, that's a problem. Number of buttons on the controller. The other thing I feel like is that finishers, again, like, you're killing a single enemy in a horde shooter. I almost feel like the problem with finishers is a bigger problem than just it is annoying to do the thing when you're doing a combo. I almost feel like finishers are sort of just in this awkward place in the game overall. So, having said that, I feel like there is a solution here, and I feel like the solution is to have finishers have a different role. Now, our developers are already to some degree aware of this, and one of the things that we've seen discussed is the idea that finishers will sort of have a different role as a finisher to combat itself, not as a way to conclude a single fight with an enemy. They'll kind of be a way to heroically end combat and then give you extra loot, for example, was something that was mentioned. The idea that Steve floated is that finishers are more like a heroic, like, action melee event rather than like part of combat overall, which sounds very good to me. Now, this would mean that things like Radial Blind, I would imagine, probably won't open enemies to finishers, and instead they'll just give you the stealth damage multiplier, which would actually be a conditional buff to some of those things. Like, that would be better in a lot of situations. Finishers are good sometimes. There are definitely things that would need to be modified if we were going to do that. But overall, that system, as much as it's not very well fleshed out and we don't really know a lot about it, that does sound like a way to do it that would be better. Like, that would address a lot of the problems that we've had. So I'm very interested to see what they do with that. So yeah, I mean, I feel your pain when you get combos interrupted with a finisher. I almost feel like rather than having a separate button to do a finisher, if they're going to keep finishers in, I would kind of rather something like you can hold a button to not do finishers where you would automatically do them, if that makes sense. So, for example, imagine once they normalize combos and we don't have block combos anymore, or the aim combos, I guess is what they are now. You're doing a combo, and holding down right mouse button while doing the combo will make you not interrupt the combo with a finisher. And then you can drive through, and you don't have to worry about, you're cleaving through tons of enemies and doing tons of slash damage and stuff, and then suddenly you just stop to kill one enemy and it's really bad. Or, like, again, those ground finishers are a particularly weak moment when this happens. I think that would be a decent solution, and that would be, I would imagine, on the easier end to implement. It would not require any like overhaul of any game systems. It would just be like when they normalize combos to be just like move forward and attack, move back and attack, move left or right and attack, stand still and attack, which is already a thing they're gonna do. Then we have the block button freed up, and then you could, or the aim button, whatever, and then you can use that to just override doing a finisher. This kind of like finisher at the end of combat thing, there's footage of this somewhere too, and it looked kind of cool. Like at the end of fighting a group of enemies, the last one, you get this big like cinematic zoom, a little bit like Ash's Bladestorm, except like less floaty looking, and you'd get a big zoom up and then like and stab the enemy through the heart, and then they puke out a bunch of loot, and like it looked cool. And having sort of an end to an engagement with a group of enemies makes the game feel less horde shootery. It's a really clever way to make the game feel less repetitive, and having it be at the end of combat is also a good way to have it be like, if you use area of effect damage, it will kill the weaker enemies, and then you want to finish off the stronger enemy, and that fits very naturally. So it wouldn't always fit. Like, obviously focus firing those heavier enemies is a good thing and sometimes kind of necessary, like with Ancients, but still an interesting idea. So yeah, I mean, I think there's hope for that. Ooh, my digestive system says so as well. Thank you to Free William for their support on patreon.com. I appreciate it very much. Free William, you've been really patient with all this stuff. You've been with me pretty much since the beginning of my time on Patreon, and you've provided a huge amount of support, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you all soon.